Alright. Now, I know I'm not the only one who feels like HoYoverse's colored units are some of the worst in their games, right? I'm not crazy. Am I crazy? I must be crazy. Does HoYoverse intentionally make their colored units worse? Right now, there's only a few, but some of them have had controversies on how bad they are. I wanted to go over this topic because for me personally, I like the black or colored characters more than others. But it's not because I'm also black or anything. I just preferred black characters over others. They don't even have to be black, just have a bit of color in their skin. I think this started with my Naruto obsession back in high school, even though she's not black. Bro, if they gave us a character with tan lines, bro, I'd go bankrupt. So with me liking characters with a bit of color in their skin, naturally I'd want to play as them. We all want to play as our favorite characters, unless you're a slave to meta. But what happens when your favorite characters just aren't that good? You have two choices: use better units or suffer through the game with your favorite subpart ones. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of the colored units in HoYoverse's games. So in this video, we'll be going over all of the colored units in each of HoYoverse's games to determine whether they're all good or bad units. Now, I'm not an expert on meta when it comes to these games, so when I go over a unit, I'll throw in a little snippet from other content creators. This will help us have a better understanding of how the communities view these characters. But first, let's talk about HoYoverse for a second. For those who don't know, HoYoverse is a company based in China who makes anime games. The most popular one being Genshin Impact. As of early 2024, HoYoverse has 3 relevant games that are currently active: Honkai Impact 3rd, Genshin Impact, and Honkai Star Rail, with Zenless Zone Zero set to come out in the future. Now, I've played all 3 games, and there's black characters or characters of color in all of them. There's not many though. The ratio from colored to non-colored characters is pretty low for the colored ones. I'd assume that's because HoYoverse's games are considered anime games, and if you've watched anime, you can see that there's not many black people in them. Name one anime with more than one black main or side character in them. It took me a while, but the only one I could really think of was My Hero Academia. I actually ended up asking my friend group if they knew any out of curiosity, and they dumped a whole list on me. I've seen most of these anime, and it's crazy how I forgot about most of these characters. Maybe I don't like black characters as much as I thought I did. Anyway, most anime take place in Japan, so the lack of black people in these environments would make sense. According to this article by David Chart, about 0.02% of the Japanese population are African American, with 2% of the population being foreigners as a whole. China, the country where HoYoverse was made, had a population of 1.4 billion in 2020. Wikipedia says that there were an estimated 500,000 Africans living in China that same year. So if we do a bit of math, we can assume that black people take up 0.03% of the Chinese population. This could very well be why there's a lack of colored people in HoYoverse's games, because they're based off of anime. Someone made a post in our anime asking why there's no black people in anime, and a deleted user had an excellent explanation. He says that media in general tends to reflect the population of the people that make it in the country it was made from. Considering the fact that anime is Japanese, most anime characters will be Japanese unless specifically stated otherwise. Black people are such a small minority in Japan that pretty much any black representation in anime would be a lot. You could say the same thing about white people in anime. It's just that no one really does, because many people just automatically assume that anime characters are white. So now let's talk about colored units in HoYoverse's games. The first one being Carol from Honkai Impact 3rd. When I first started playing Honkai Impact 3rd, I immediately noticed that Carol was the only black character in the game. Looking for a waifu to main, I immediately gravitated to her. I didn't find her that attractive at first, but her looks started to grow on me after a while. Gameplay wise, she's a support / sub DPS. I haven't played much Honkai Impact 3rd, but I'll do my best to explain what she does in game. So basically, her kit is built around breaking shields of enemies and bosses. This is really useful because most, if not all, bosses in the game have shields. Her playstyle is basically you go and break the boss's shield and then swap to your main DPS for massive damage. Carol is the only unit in the game who does this to my knowledge. So I think she's pretty good in this game, and it seems like the community likes her too. Carol really doesn't have any good guides, so I don't have any clips to show you. I could have just been yapping for the past 5 minutes and we wouldn't know because there's no guides on Carol. Little side note, going off script here, she's one of the 3 playable characters in the, I believe it's called post Honkai Odyssey game mode, and the combat there is completely different from the original game, and it's so much more fun, and she is such a fun character to play with there. And she's really good. I love her. So I wouldn't say that there's anything fishy going on with Carol or Honkai Impact 3rd other than the fact that Carol is the only black unit out of dozens in the game. Moving on to Genshin, we have our first character of color, Kaeya. Kaeya is one of the free 4-star units you get at the start of the game. All of the starting 4 stars suck, so I really don't have much to say about Kaeya. Most content creators talking about Kaeya online are mostly just like making videos on how to like make him super good. There's really no like honest reviews on how good or bad he is. Our next black character is Xinyan. Xinyan was the first black character to be featured on an event banner, and she sucked. I think Xinyan was the first new 4-star to be straight garbage, and I would know because I mained her for almost a year. Before I started Genshin Impact, I watched a trailer of all the characters I wanted to play, and Xinyan was one of the ones I wanted because I liked the way she looked. Needless to say, I was stoked when I got her back when I first started playing in 1.7. I mained her all the way up until 2.4 when I first got Hutao. Keep in mind that I was a new player when I got Xinyan, so I just thought the game was hard when I was playing with her. But only when melting enemies with my Hutao that I had previously struggled with was when I realized how bad Xinyan actually was. So why is Xinyan so bad? From what I heard on Vars's video on why no one plays Xinyan, Xinyan was one of Hoyo's first failed attempts at a dual scaling character in Genshin. Xinyan is a support slash sub DPS unit. Her elemental skill gives your team a shield and also deals burst of AoE power damage if you hit 2 or more enemies with her initial swing of activating the skill. Her burst deals initial physical damage and it's followed up by AoE pyro damage. So she gives a shield while dishing out a little damage too, basically. But there's a problem. In order to even have a decent shield, you have to invest in her defense stats. But if you do that, she won't have good damage output. But also, if you invest in chest attack, her shield is gonna be ass. The problem is you can only really do one or the other, and if you try to do both, then she just gets even worse. You can't use Xinyan to her full potential because her kit is essentially split in half. Let's take someone like Noelle, for example, who basically does the same thing as Xinyan. She's a shielder who puts in some extra damage, but in this case, her damage and shields scale off of defense, getting the best of both worlds. Hoyo could have easily fixed this if they would have just made Xinyan's shield scale off of attack instead of defense. So why not have her scale like Noelle does? Why make her worse? Xinyan also has a multitude of other problems, like her AoE from her skill being useless on bosses and single enemies. Her burst deals 2 different types of damage, and her AoE from her skill not even working sometimes when you hit 2 or more enemies according to Mtashed.
She's suffering from a bit of an identity crisis. Her entire kit is at odds with itself. She's a damage dealer but has a lot of elements that give off the impression of a support. She's a physical attacker yet can achieve superconduct without external help. She's a main DPS but has long cooldowns and poor single target damage, and her different attacks don't scale off the same metric. Essentially, you can never quite use 100% of her power because if you spec fully into damage or defense, you miss out on the other, while splitting your resources leads to mediocre results on both ends. Is she a damage dealer like Hu Tao? Is she a tank like Noelle? Is she a support like Zhongli? Is she a bruiser like Beidou? The lack of a clear role for her makes it difficult for people to associate a reason to want to use her.
So yeah, Xinyan was the first ever new black 4-star and also was the first ever new 4-star to get screwed over by HoYoverse. Next up is Cyno. By the way, HoYoverse went almost 2 years without releasing another colored character, but I guess that's fine since the nations leading up to Sumeru aren't known for having colored people on them. Sumeru is based off of Middle Eastern nations like Egypt, India, Persia, and Mesopotamia. So you'd expect the characters in Sumeru to look like they're from those nations, right? Out of all of the 12 playable characters in Sumeru, only 3 of them are colored. Like, imagine if 80% of people in Wakanda had white skin. And I understand that they made it to where only characters from the desert are colored while everyone else who lives in the forest are as pale as vampires.
Don't come to my house or else I'll suck your dick, blood. I'll suck your blood.
I guess it makes sense, but damn, bro, at least have it like 50-50 or something. I want more colored characters, man. Anyways, back to Cyno. Cyno is the first 5-star colored character to be featured on an event banner. He's an Electro main DPS, and from what I've heard, he's pretty good. Not broken, not bad, just good. I don't have Cyno, so I won't be going over or reviewing his kit. I'm purely going off of what I've heard and videos I've seen on the internet.
Cyno is a very strong pull, but I don't think he's a super valuable pull. He's not a character you get just to strengthen your account. He's a character you get because you think he's cool. But I think that if you build him well and play him well, like, you can't be disappointed in his power. He has a strong power. I'm not advocating that Cyno is like that insane and is my favorite DPS in the game or something, but he's very strong, he's very fun, and I think he's pretty darn underrated.
So I don't have much to say about Cyno. It doesn't seem like there's anything sus going on behind the scenes with him. Now before we move on, I'm gonna just keep it 100. I'm only here for the view. Okay. I have an online shop where I sell HoYoverse phone themes. They're basically packs that come with wallpapers, widgets, and app icons. And each one is themed after a character from one of HoYoverse's games. If you're not big on app icon packs, that's fine, but if you ever want to try them out, I am giving away an app icon set of our Lord and Savior TECTONE. Just enter your email in the TECTONE section of the homepage and it will send immediately. These work with iOS and Android, and even on tablets and iPads with the two-tone sets for anyone who doesn't want their co-workers or classmates to know that they play Genshin Impact. I made these just because I was tired of having a messy home screen aesthetic that didn't blend at all. So I made a few anime themes of my own and they perfectly fit together, and I really like the way they turned out. So I figured this would be a good business idea considering how many people are parasocial with their waifus. A lot of people like to decorate their wallpapers with their favorite anime characters and stuff like that. So yeah, if you're ever interested, links in bio. Next we have Candace. Candace is a 4-star Hydro unit. Her elemental skill is similar to Beto's, where she can hold her skill to block incoming damage and release it to deal Hydro damage. Her burst sends out waves of water, dealing AoE Hydro damage while infusing your weapon with Hydro and giving your team an elemental damage buff. Now I wouldn't say Candace is a bad unit, but she does what other characters can do better. You want Hydro application? Use Xinyan. You want an elemental damage buff? Use Mona. Candace only truly shines when you don't have these other characters as options. This means that Candace isn't used in most teams that value a Hydro unit. Candace is a last resort unit.
Sure, she can be shoehorned in as a support for characters like Ayato, but you're mainly doing that because you like Candace and not because she's better than other options like Xingqiu, Yelan, or Yunjin. Seriously, there's some really tough competition for Candace right now for those roles. Her current ability to infuse Hydro on melee characters is fun and unique, like we saw with the Sunfire Dragon Strike, but it's far from being fully actualized in terms of its potential.
I wouldn't say HoYoverse screwed Candace over like how they did Xinyan, but they did kind of do her dirty by reverse power creeping her. But to be fair, she hasn't been the only reverse power creep unit to release lately. With all that said, I wouldn't say there's anything sus going on with Candace. Now we have the infamous Dehya. I'm sure many of you know what's up with Dehya, but I'll give you the rundown anyway. Dehya is a 5-star power unit who's supposed to be a support slash sub DPS similar to Xinyan. Her elemental skill places down a field around her. The field makes coordinated pyro attacks with the active character, and if the active character takes damage, they split around half of it with Dehya. As for her ultimate, it's a barrage of pyro attacks. She basically beats the bricks out of you. So first, let's get something out the way. Her damage is ass, but that's okay, because she's not supposed to be a main DPS. A lot of fans of Dehya, including me, were let down because we were all looking forward to using Dehya as a main DPS. Which is why I think this was one of the biggest reasons the community started to call her bad. Dehya's kit isn't built to dish out DPS. It's made for a more supportive role with a bit of damage on the side. Role-wise, I say she's similar to Zhongli, with their skill being for defense and their burst being for offense. Zhongli does more damage in this case, but a unit's lack of damage is fine as long as they can make up for it in some other way. Take Kokomi for example. She can't crit, but she makes up for it with a massive amount of healing. But in Dehya's case, she really doesn't make up for her lack of damage at all. Her skill is supposed to keep your team from dying by dealing half of the damage taken by the active character to Dehya instead, so the active character doesn't have to take the full brunt of the blow. The problem with this is your active character may only take half of the damage, but you're still taking 100% of the damage when it comes to overall team HP. It's like trying to use a shield without a shield. Dehya does make up for this by healing herself and only herself with one of her talents, but the healing sucks if you try to run DPS artifacts on her. I came across a video that Jack773 made where they show off a healing build that makes her almost unkillable. He ran the clam set with HP and bonus healing on the artifacts, and it actually worked. He was damn near unkillable, so I decided to try it out myself. I did the Raiden Shogun boss fight with this build and everyone on the team died besides Dehya. Raiden actually could not kill my Dehya. I would have soloed her with Dehya alone if she didn't use her wipe mechanic. This sounds pretty good, right? An almost unkillable unit that tanks half of your party members' damage. But in case you forgot, most of the team died during this run. Dehya's field that mitigates damage only lasts for 12 seconds with a 20-second cooldown, leaving your team booty butt naked for 8 seconds. Within those 8 seconds, your characters will be taking 100% of the damage dealt to them. Even if you're in the field, your characters still die over time if they eventually end up taking double their max HP as damage. With this unit being so bad, she really doesn't have any good teams. Obviously, you can throw her in random teams like Mono Pyro, but like, what's the point when you have Bennett healing everyone? In most teams, other units can do her job, but better. So, what does Dehya bring to the table? The meta? Nothing. Dehya is a dead unit. Now I think about it, Dehya is just a 5-star Xinyan. They're both female, Claymore users, Pyro. Their skill is for defense, while their burst is for offense. They're bad, and they're black. Well, actually, they might be brown.
Hey everyone, MTest here, and today we're going to be talking about the newest 3-star unit, Dehya. Now, people have been comparing her to Xinyan. She's terrible. She is an absolutely terrible unit. Now, can you make her good? Not really. Her multipliers damage-wise are not that impressive, but where she fits into the different team comps of Genshin Impact is almost non-existent. I'm going to go through a few different things about why I think Dehya really sucks. And I know that some people sugarcoat it, and they don't want to offend people because they say, oh, the character sucks. I will never tell you to get Dehya. And there is a new 5-star artifact set that's coming. I truly don't believe it's enough. I've already looked at leaks. I truly don't believe it'll be enough. The math on it, it might look good, but you could literally just use like the emblem set and get similar damage. Like it's like 1% different, says Zajeff, the theory crafting math man. But she sucks. She's a terrible character.
No one could even begin to understand why they did this. But moving on, we have our latest character to be released in HoYoverse's newest game, Arlan from Honkai Star Rail. Arlan is a 4-star Electro unit. Arlan is a high-risk, decent reward character. His playstyle is based around lowering his own HP in order to deal more damage without using skill points. His skill consumes 20% of his HP to deal a single target electro attack, but it doesn't use up a skill point. His burst deals AoE electro damage to a target and enemies adjacent to it. His talent lets him deal more damage the lower his health is, which fits really nicely with his skill that reduces his own HP. He's kinda like Hu Tao from Genshin Impact, but he has some problems. In order to get the full potential out of his talent, Arlan needs to be as low as possible. This leaves him in a very vulnerable state, and I've had him die a multitude of times because of this. Arlan needs a healer and a shielder in order to function, unless you maybe have Japard or Fushuan. I personally don't have them. With a healer and shielder taking up 2 spots on the team, you only have one other character to help out with DPS. Not to mention that HoYoverse nerfed Arlan's skill damage before Honkai released. One day I was doing Sim Uni and fighting Kaeya on like my 5th try, and Arlan fucking died, and I just snapped. I couldn't. I love him, but I just couldn't play like that anymore, so I dropped him. Arlan's risky gameplay isn't worth his mid damage, which is why I went back to being a Serval main.
Looking at Arlan's kit, looking at what Arlan needs, that he needs a shielder. He cannot heal, because if he heals, he loses his damage boost he gets from this trait right here. So you want to have basically 25% or less to get your max amount. And him being at 11, 10, 10, to be honest, in my honest opinion, if anything sneezes in Arlan's direction, he's going to get smacked up. And this is even with giving him a max HP light cone, with even giving him extra crit, with the damage boost, with him having Bronyo, with him having Xinyan, the energy, the crit damage to give on top. He has 72, 173 already. I don't know what better condition I could give this guy. This dude is at level 75, not 80, but I have other characters like Misha who are at 75 as well that did 400k damage with the fall of an Aeon. So I don't know. Me personally, man, does Arlan have a really cool play style, but just not enough power to suffice having that type of risk. Having 1 HP, I should be almost one-shotting these characters with an ultimate, with a skill, because I'm playing in this risky type of way where I want to stay at 1 HP, I want to stay at low health, but I need a shielder that could possibly get eviscerated and then I die. Or if my shield expires, I die. Like, there's a lot of things that are conditional that Arlan has to deal with that puts him in a really bad spot for a majority of the things, and especially with the enemies in Pentacon, and especially with the enemies that are here in this game, currently in the game, Arlan just gets absolutely eviscerated.
Overall, it just seems like HoYoverse was trying to make a fun character here, but it just didn't work. The skill nerf was sus though. Why nerf his damage when half of the team can't deal any real damage in the first place? Or buff Arlan's own damage. Arlan is the worst unit in the game. And guess what? He's also the only black one too. And that's all of the colored characters in HoYoverse's games. So let's quickly recap everything we went over. Carol is good, but she's the only black character in Honkai Impact 3rd. Dehya and Xinyan are horrible units. No one uses Candace or Kaeya unless they have to. Cyno is the only good colored character in Genshin. And Arlan is the only black character in his game, and he's also one of the worst units to play because he always dies. Bro's superpower is literally killing himself. Now all of this may sound bad, but let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Maybe these games have a bunch of bad units and our favorite colored characters just so happen to be a part of that bad bunch. So let's compare our colored units to the rest of the units in their games. I don't know how good other units are in Honkai Impact 3rd, but with Carol being one of the only units in the game that does what she does, I'd say she's pretty good compared to the other units in the game. She's ranked higher than most units I see in tier list, usually being A or S here. I'd say Kaeya is on the same level as the other 4-star units giving to you at the start of the game. I'd assume that most 4-star units were good when Xinyan came out, and she was straight up worse than most of them on her release. Some of those 4-stars could be considered bad now due to power creep, but Xinyan is still 1 or 2 steps below them. Cyno's pretty good, on par with other main DPS units in the game. Candace isn't great, but other 4-star units coming around this time were also being labeled mid. Dory probably has it worse than Candace. This was when I started to hear more about Genshin's reverse power creep problem. Dehya's a 5-star that's worse than most 4-star characters in Genshin. And Arlan is hands down the worst unit in the game. Compared to other units in their games, I'd say 4 out of the 7 colored units are balanced, with the other 3 being bad. So after all that, would you call HoYoverse racist and or colorist for how they designed these units? Looking back at all the characters, I've seen a few patterns that I don't like how they made Dehya just a 5-star Xinyan. But racist is it's a strong word. The word has kinda lost its weight recently after how much people use it for the tiniest shit. You don't like this character singing? Well, that means you're racist! Like, you can't even disagree with black people without being called racist.
Let me tell you why you shouldn't support Tuano. Da 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 da. He's racist.
Calling a big corporate company racist feels a bit weird to me. Maybe it's because in America, big companies try to look the best they can in the eyes of the public, to the point of even changing their brand logos in fear of being called racist. And half of Hoyo's colored units are balanced, so I'll refrain on my judgment until Natlan hits. I hope that they're not racist, but in all reality, they probably don't care about anyone's tone. Even if they were racist, at the end of the day, these are just video games. I really don't think it's a big deal. But what do you think? I actually want to hear your opinions in the comments. I was going to talk about future colored units and speculate whether I think they'd be good or not, but the video is already pretty long, so I'll save that topic for a future video. But that's pretty much it for my analysis on colored units in HoYoverse games. If I got anything wrong or you disagree with one of my points, feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, then you're in luck because I'm just gonna make more. If you like listening to topics on HoYoverse games like Honkai and Genshin, then I highly recommend you subscribe. All of the content creators I mentioned are in the description if you want to check them out. My online shop is also in the description if you're interested in spicing up your phone's home screen. You get a free TECTONE icon set for just signing up for our newsletter. All hail our Lord and Savior TECTONE!